If you took some form of public transportation, you may have noticed less people wearing masks. That's because a federal judge struck down the CDC mask mandate for public transportation. Passengers cheered, whistled, and applauded. They threw away masks after the announcement. Several major airlines quickly dropped the mandate on Monday following the judge's ruling. Travelers' reactions were mixed.
I'm super excited.
I don't think masks are necessary.
I felt much more comfortable keeping mine on.
Today, when asked whether people should continue wearing masks, President Biden responded,
"That's up to them."
For now, the mandate for travel is officially over. However, local governments and travel organizations can still enforce their own regulations. The White House says agencies are reviewing next steps and may still appeal the court's decision. And the CDC has dropped all remaining countries from its top COVID-19 travel advisory warning. The agency said Monday it's removed about 90 destinations from its level 4 do not travel category. The decision came days after the CDC said the highest risk category will only be reserved for extreme scenarios. More than 100 countries, including Canada, the UK, and other popular European destinations, still have a level 3 advisory for a high COVID-19 warning. More Democrats are pushing back against President Biden's plan to end Title 42 next month. That includes Biden ally Senator Chris Coons. Coons said he hoped that the administration can reconsider the decision to lift Title 42.
My hope is that that will be reconsidered appropriately. I know that there are both Republicans and Democrats calling for a reconsideration.
Under Title 42, Border Patrol can deport illegal aliens quickly for public health reasons related to the pandemic. The Biden administration is terminating this Trump-era policy beginning May 23rd. Yet more Democrats are joining Republicans in opposing the move. Senator Gary Peters said that the plan to end Title 42 should be revisited and perhaps delayed. And 5 Democrat senators co-sponsored a bipartisan bill to temporarily block the lifting of Title 42. The White House announced they're restoring environmental regulations that will give the federal government a heavier hand over infrastructure projects in the name of fighting climate change. NTD's Melina Wisecup has more details.
The White House is feeling the heat for resuming oil and gas leasing on federal lands, which is contrary to its climate pledges. Now the administration is eager to send the message that they are still working to clean up the environment. One plan of action is imposing more federal regulations on infrastructure projects. Today, the White House finalized a rule to strengthen the National Environmental Policy Act. It would put projects like building highways, pipelines, and oil wells under the microscope for rigorous environmental reviews by the government. These regulations were peeled back under Trump to try to speed up building pipelines and infrastructure projects that he said would boost the economy and provide jobs. The Biden administration says reimposing what they call environmental safeguards will speed up the process for infrastructure projects. But critics say the regulations could slow things down. This new rule will soon be put to the test as states roll out new projects funded under the recently signed infrastructure law. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The U.S. economy is in flux and experts are forecasting a possible recession. What might that mean for the tech industry moving forward, a sector that has shown remarkable strength in the markets? Well, our next guest wrote the book, Your Data, Their Billions, and explores one of the dark sides of big tech and how they're making billions from people like you and I without us even knowing it. Here's a look at our interview with author Jane Hoffman. Jane Hoffman, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, there are multiple areas where people are pushing back on big tech. You have censorship, you have the effects that it has on children. Then one that you have to really, that you've dug deep into is in your book, is the issue of privacy. And how might one's privacy be at stake when it comes to all of these big tech companies?
Well, I think people have a different notion of privacy today. Privacy may mean something to me, but it might mean something very different to maybe a 15-year-old. And unfortunately, privacy is becoming a luxury good. So what's happened is your data, every time you type something in on your computer, you search for something, or you're on your phone, you're actually being tracked. You're leaving breadcrumbs and a trail so that you can be found because you're the product That's how it works. You're the product. So nothing you do is private. There are about 2,000 bits of information that big tech has on you. Right now, nobody probably knows exactly where you are, what medications you take, your sexuality, what you buy online, but you know who knows? Big tech knows.
Wow, that's pretty scary. Now, are all of these companies, whether it's big tech, social media, credit card companies, et cetera, sharing data behind the scenes to establish these types of profiles on people?
All these companies are buying and selling your data. So it's shared, but there's a cost associated with it. So because it's your data, they're making billions off of it. So there's what's called a data broker. So every time you're doing something online, they're buying that piece of information. So say you want to buy snow boots. They know algorithmically people who want to buy snow boots are also looking for mittens, and they'll send you ads for mittens. And what's happened is we live in what's called a filter bubble. So you only see things that reinforce your current behavior. And politically, we may think of it as the splinternet rather than the internet, because people are being divided by their behavior and their online activities.
So you may have just answered this, but why is the data so important to them?
That's how they make their money. They make their money on advertising and selling the data. So they make their money not through a subscription model, but through owning your data and selling it. Now, if you're an EMT and you're having a heart attack, you want that data widely available so someone can save your life. But if the EMT is selling that data to a tabloid, you might not want that. We're spending about 4 hours and 23 minutes a day, a third of our day, on the phone. That's vastly different than 5 years ago. And what does this prognosticate for the future? Are we going to be just living in a metaverse, which is what Facebook would like, so that we're communicating to each other online with these personas that we create?
So it's about business now. Could this level of tracking and information lead to something much more totalitarian with a flip of the switch?
It could, depending on who that information is shared with. So you have to think really long and hard about how much you want your information online. I propose a couple of things. One thing I propose is kind of an NPR of Google that has no buying and selling of your data. I call it Oogle, and it would be like the PBS of search. So you wouldn't get ads, and you could search for things without your data being bought and sold.
Now, are we seeing anything in terms of that, totalitarian angle in countries that have a certain amount of advanced technology and infrastructure that have really been data focused, such as China? And how might they be using malevolently the data of their citizens?
Well, I think there's a different social contract in China than there is in the U.S. In the U.S., we have a different social contract. We have a sense of privacy. And in China, you have to assume that everything you do online, the government knows, and it's the government's business.
Jane Hoffman, author of Your Data, Their Billions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
A federal judge ruled that a group's challenge to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's candidacy in the state of Georgia in this year's elections will be able to proceed. The lawsuit is using a rarely invoked constitutional clause. The lawsuit claims the Congresswoman engaged in a supposed insurrection against the U.S. government in the January 6th Capitol breach of the U.S. Capitol building. Greene represents Georgia's 14th congressional district and is an outspoken supporter of former President Donald Trump. The rarely invoked disqualification clause was enacted in the wake of the Civil War to keep former Confederates out of Congress. According to the New York Times, Greene's attorney describes the ruling as flawed. He also says Greene publicly and vigorously condemned the attack on the Capitol. Greene vigorously denies the claims against her and argues that the state law governing election challenges is unconstitutional because it shifts the burden of proof from the accuser to the accused. The facts surrounding the Capitol breach have been slow to emerge. Most recently, one January 6th defendant's case was dismissed when video emerged of the defendant being allowed into the Capitol building without any forced entry.